As you can see in your bulletin, there is a special title which I have chosen today to discuss the question which maybe you have met or asked many times in your life. And that question is that Jesus is calling his disciples and his church to pray. Now, we are familiar as Christians with prayer, and I would say maybe all religions in this world are familiar with prayer, because the deities that all religions are following are the deities that show that these people need to pray. Now, every religion has a different theory or idea how that deity responds to their prayer. And I was wondering if we as Christians know how much we know our Lord God to answer our prayers. Many Christians and many times are thinking that prayer is just a ritual that is coming and passing without any response or without any fruit. You pray your prayer and you finish your prayer and you continue the same life as before. And then you pray next day again because it is your custom, and then nothing happens. And many times and many people are asking themselves, why is nothing happening after I pray? I'm calling God, I'm learning, I take the book of worship or whatever, the book of prayers, and I pray on every day different page of these prayers, and I finish with that, and finally I don't have any result of that. Now the question comes to this: is God really answering our prayers? When God is answering our prayers? And how God answers our prayers? There are many questions that you might ask about the prayer and about your communication with God. Now, first of all, I want us to think of what really prayer is. When you understand what prayer is, maybe in short explanation, then you will enter into the realm of understanding how to pray, how God answers, what to pray, what to be answered, and all of those things that are coming after that. Remember one thing, when you read Genesis chapter 1, you will find out how God created the heavens and the earth. Then when you read chapter 2 and 3, you will find out how Adam and Eve were talking to God. I would say opposite. God was talking to them. They were holding quiet, and we don't read that anything with Adam and Eve happened before God. And then we see that God had commanded Adam and Eve not to eat from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and that as soon as they eat, they would die. Now, after all of that story that happened later on, Adam and Eve were taken out of the Garden of Eden, and they left to work the land as God had blessed them, with the sweat on their forehead, and to eat the bitterness of the fruit of the land until they return. And in that moment we read that God, I would say, disappeared, left Adam and Eve on the earth. Now Adam and Eve needed to call or to ask for God, but they didn't. They needed to call God to come back, but they didn't. God was far away from them, waiting for them to call Him. And we read in the Bible, I would say among the lines, that 500 years passed through the history of humanity No one was praying to God. You can imagine, the humanity was growing, people were multiplying day by day, year by year, and no one was calling to the Creator, to God, to give Him glory, to call Him for help and for blessing. And I would say people were living wildly. Whatever happens, it happens. And there were many murders, there were many quarrels, there were many arguments, and there was evil on this earth. We read in chapter 5 and chapter 6 of Genesis. And it came to such a point that God was sorry for creating the human beings. But after 500 years, people began to remember or to think of their Creator and calling upon Him. Maybe in very simple ways. Maybe they did not have any written prayer. But you know, in 1970s there was a pop singer in England called Cliff Richard. He went on one of Billy Graham's crusades, evangelistic meetings on one big football ground. But he was not believing. He was not a Christian. For him, God did not exist. He never prayed. And then at that moment when he came, he sat at the front row of that big stadium. And when Billy Graham was preaching right in the middle of the sermon, he began to ask, does God exist? Is God real? And then finally, when Billy Graham was inviting people to come forward and to declare their faith to the living God, Cliff Richard was calling and asking, Lord, if you are real, be real to me. That was the first prayer of this young man. If you are real, Lord, be real to me. And then later on he wrote a song with those words. But then the Lord became real to him and said, Cliff, I am real and I want to be real for you. And then he turned all his pop songs to Christian songs. And he went to several countries to sing Christian songs, and people were disappointed, asking him, why you are singing Christian songs? He said, because God became real to me, and because God needs to be and to become real to you. So this is the prayer when person is finding himself lost in this society, and when person is feeling that nobody cares about him or her in that society, then that person turns to somebody or to something, thinking, is anybody caring for me? That's the point, the starting of a prayer. Is anybody caring for me? Yes, there is somebody whom your physical eyes do not see and whom your physical sense does not sense. And that person is waiting for you to call him and to say, really, if you are real, Lord, be real to me. Help me in this situation. Now we see that we come to the second question that we might have answered already. But we need to touch that question too. Many people are saying, why praying? When you read the Gospel of Matthew, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talking to his disciples in chapter 6 of the Gospel of Matthew, you will find out how Jesus is saying, when you pray to your Father, and He knows and He hears you. He knows what you need even before you mention, before you say. And many Christians are saying, this is the point. If God knows what I need, I don't need to pray. Why praying? God knows that I need something, and therefore He has to provide for me on time, in place, and because I am His child. Now I would ask the parents who have children, and you have grown children. When your children were hungry but not asking you for food, did you give them? No, you did not have even time to think feeding your children. I remember one day our middle child, our daughter, who was very little eating. And my wife was very busy one day with different things, and it came late afternoon. She remembered and said, "Maggie, did you eat today anything?" "Oh, no, Mommy, I'm not hungry." So the child did not call, did not ask, and all the day was completely hungry. You see, many times it happens that our children would not ask for something and we don't know, or we forget in our busyness through the day, and they remain. But that's the reason, because they do not ask. Jesus is saying, knock and it shall be opened to you. Ask and it shall be given to you. Search and you will find. Without action, nothing of this happens. If you don't knock, the door remains closed. If you don't ask, you don't receive. If you don't search, you don't find. And therefore many Christians are becoming poorer and poorer in their Christian life because they are not asking or calling on God to help them and to bless them. Prayer for many is just something not convenient for them. Prayer is for priests, they say. Prayer is for pastors and not for us. But the Bible teaches us that the prayer is for everybody, for all human beings. And you see, we read in the Bible that even the animals are praying to God. But I'll leave it for you to find out where are the animals praying to God in the Bible. Now, this is the answer. Why praying? Because we need communication and we need special blessings from the Lord to give us. But the Lord is waiting and saying, okay, if you are for me, then I'll be for you. If you are calling on my name, I'll bless you and I'll give you what you need. But if you are fleeing away from me, I'm not running after you. I'll just stand. And if you read the last book of the Old Testament, book of Malachi, you will find out where God is telling his nation, his people, turn to me, he says, O Israel, and I shall turn to you. So when we are turning our back to God, God is turning his back to us. When we are not listening to God, God is not listening to us. And therefore he says, whenever you turn to me, I'll turn to you. He says, am I too poor to bless you? If you follow me, or if you pray to me, if you call my name, am I not able, God says, to open the windows of heaven and pour down blessings upon blessings for you? Am I not able? Oh, Israel, God was speaking to that nation. I can bless you, but if you call upon my name. Now, let us take some more examples. In our text, in our Old Testament text, we read how Moses was praying when he found himself in very hard, difficult situation. When Israel was lying before God, claiming that in Egypt, remember, in Egypt they were slaves. Without their identity, without any kind of freedom. Now they say, in Egypt we had onion, garlic, and leeks, and melons, and watermelons, and fish, and everything. How much a slave can have? How much a slave can have? This was a lie before God, but this was something to provoke Moses. And Moses began to cry to God and saying, Lord, why you have set me here? Because I cannot hear the voices of these people. Israel was not praying before God, but Israel was complaining against God. So remember, the prayer is not criticizing God. The prayer is not complaint against God. But the prayer is humbleness before God and asking for what we need. If Israel was in prayer together with Moses before the tabernacle, God would give them meat. But they were not asking for meat. They were grumbling. They were criticizing where God had led us here in this desert where we have no meat. Where you, Moses, was leading us in this place where there is no water and there is no food, but only this manna that is disgusting our mouth. And then God, said to Moses, if you want, then I'll fulfill what you want. Now, one thing I would like to warn you, God does not like our destruction. Moses is praying and saying, Lord, if you have put me here, kill me in this place because I cannot go anymore. Kill me in this place. He is praying. Is God killing him? Has God killed him? No. God is not God of killing. God is not God of torturing. God is God of blessing and guiding and care for all children of this humanity, no matter whether they are Christians or non-Christians, whether they are Hebrews, Jews, or other nations. God cares for all nations. And He prepared and blessed this earth. And scientifically said this earth is prepared to feed 100 billion people. And not only 7 as they are existing on this earth. God had blessed this earth to feed normally through all the year days 100 billion people. And now remember how many people of these 7 billions are starving, suffering, and dying because of poverty. And that's because people do not care for each other and do not pray to God and do not ask God's blessings. Now, one thing further on, God is not killing Moses. God is blessing Moses. And He said, call to me 70 people from your camp, from Israel, and bring them here. I'll take the spirit out of you and give the spirit to them. Moses was satisfied. Okay, Lord, even that, let me be put down, but you take care over these people. So all of these 70 began to prophesy. As the 12 disciples were prophesying in Acts of Apostles chapter 2, called not prophesying but speaking about the glories of God in different tongues. Now we see that these 70 began to prophesy for a while, but continually another 2 that were not in that midst. And that was a confusion. Joshua comes to Moses and saying, Master, there are 2 people who are prophesying and they don't see he's prophesying. That was the response of Moses' prayer. That God responded and said, I'll bring your spirit to them. And they prophesied. The chosen one, the blessed one from God is prophesying. You see in first book of Samuel when Saul was chosen to be the king or anointed to be a king, then he went down in a group of prophets in one of the small towns, and he began to prophesy for surprise of many people who knew him. But God has poured out His Spirit on him so that he was prophesying. But Samuel was praying. Remember and read the beginning of the first book of Samuel, how Samuel is praying to God and asking, Oh Lord, why have they left you? Why have they are asking for king? Why they have doing this? And God says to him, do not cry. They did not leave you, they left me. Therefore go out and find a king for them as they are asking for the king. Whatever Israel was asking was receiving for their unhappiness, I would say. But God was actually answering and saying, okay, I'll give you, although it is not for your benefit. Now we see Jesus is answering the prayers of many people. But how? I'll give you just several examples. Maybe the time has gone, and this is really wide subject to talk and to see, but I'll give you several. You remember, some of you with whom I was talking, God has 3 answers in answering our prayer. In one of them, He might say, no, this is not for you. Do not pray. Finish. We have several examples in the Bible where Jesus is saying no. Second point that Jesus is also giving us is, wait, it is not my time. Just to give you a short example for that, if you read, excuse me, if you read Gospel of Matthew chapter 19, you will find out how Jesus is telling the disciples to give. Then in Gospel of Mark we see that in chapter 7 Jesus is out of Israel in the region of Tyre and Sidon, and the woman, Syrophoenician woman, comes to him and asks him for the healing of her daughter. What Jesus is answering? He is saying, wait, a woman, let us feed first our children, and then what will remain for you. Let us feed first our children, because it is not good to take the bread out of the table of the children and throw it to the little dogs. Wait. But this woman was desperate in her asking and trouble. And she said, Lord, even the dogs are eating from the crumbs under the table. Please give me the crumbs. And Jesus said to her, originally I would say, or just directly, this is the time for helping this woman. The time has come. It's not wait anymore. And he said, go, your daughter is healed. And there are many other examples in the Gospels, especially where Jesus is simply prolonging the answer of the prayers of people. Now let me say the third one, where Jesus is saying yes. If you read, for example, in Gospel of Mark chapter 10, you will find out the story of Bartimaeus, the blind man in Jericho. He was listening about people around Jericho following Jesus, and many talking about that. And he was asking, who is that? What is happening? Who is passing by? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth is here. He is passing by. And then he began to cry, Lord, Son of David, please help me, help me. And people are stopping him. Stop, don't shout. Jesus is busy. He's walking, going around and going to different places. But he was even harder shouting. And then Jesus, when he heard his voice, he said, bring him here. And he said to Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? And he said, Lord, Rabboni, just to give me my sight, just to see. That's it, nothing else. And Jesus did not delay. He said, yes, go. Your sight is given to you. And Bartimaeus began to see. He did not go away. He followed Jesus, praising and glorifying God, giving glory for all of that happened in his life. You see, Jesus is saying no for some reason. He knows why. He says, wait, it is not your time now. I'll do, but you continue to pray. And he says right away, yes, I'm ready to help you and to answer your prayer. That's how God answers our prayers. Now, how do you pray? Whether do you pray or not, that's your personal, private question. I'm not entering that question, and there is no time, because I have taken longer time in preaching this morning than ever. But I hope you will forgive me for that. May the Lord help you and teach you through His Spirit. Because the Spirit of God is teaching us what to pray, how to pray, when to pray, and what attitude should we take in our cooperation or working together with Jesus. Then God is teaching us. And the disciples, feeling that need of prayer, they asked Jesus, please teach us how to pray. And he gave them the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, which is written in chapter 6, verses 9 to 13 in Gospel of Matthew. Read whenever you want. Read every time. Read whenever you have no other words. And pray to God with that word. And it is really sufficient. Aside from all you need to tell Jesus, to tell the Lord what you really need in that particular moment. May the Lord be praised and glorified. May His name be lifted up, because He is ready to give answer to all our prayers. And we have to be ready to hear His answer. May His name be praised and glorified now and forever. Amen.